Good afternoon, good morning, good night, good evening, wherever you are. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this new edition of our Box Office live sessions. If someone on stage on the chat can give me a feedback on sound, you can hear me well, just to make sure we can get started. I'll take it as a yes, sound okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Very happy to have you here today with us. People from 55 countries have registered for this event, north of 700 people. So welcome, everybody. And without further ado, you know that I have a guest that all of you know well next to me. But before inviting Andrew to join us on stage, Andrew has a little treat for you that I'm going to share right now. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Julian.
Us. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Julian.
More used to it than us. Good to have you with us, Andrew.
It's good to be with you, Julian. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. What a great look back at Cine Europe 2019. Just wanted to say on behalf of Bob Sunshine, myself, and our entire team, we hope you and your families are all staying safe and doing your part to help curb this global pandemic. Julian, Stan, and the entire box office team, thank you for this opportunity to say hello to everybody. We also want to say thank you and congratulate you on this tremendous service that you've been providing for this industry in these difficult times, bringing people together. Needless to say, we're living in some unprecedented times. As you are all aware, our partners at Unique and our team have made the decision to redate this year's Cine Europe event to August 3rd through 6th. This will provide us an additional 6 weeks to try and get this convention to happen, as long as it can be done safely for all of our attendees, for all of our guests. That is our top priority. That is our #1 priority, is safety. We've made a decision that come June 18th, a final decision will be made one way or the other as to how we will proceed with this year's convention. We're hopeful that we're able to pull things off. We've spoken with our friends in distribution, with many of our friends on the trade show, with many of our sponsors, and it is the feeling of nearly everyone that if the opportunity to bring our great industry together in August presents itself, it would be a wonderful celebration and a great way for our industry to get back together. All of us believe in the face-to-face time these meetings provide, the opportunity to meet with friends, colleagues, to do business. Everyone, including myself, I'm sure have had a lot of time to reflect on things these past weeks, and for some of us these past months. Our business is a strong one. It brings people together to share the ultimate communal experience, and I, for one, believe we'll come out of this stronger than we've ever been once we get through this. I can promise you that Cine Europe will do its part to make this happen if we can provide a safe environment. We missed seeing you all at CinemaCon last month, but we hope to see you all in August. But for now, stay close to your loved ones, do your part and help stop the spread of this virus, and let's all keep positive thoughts that we'll be together in August. And now it's my pleasure to introduce a dear friend, Mr. Mike Archer, the Vice President of Global Sales at Dolby, just to say a few words. Thanks again, Julian.
Thank you, Andrew. Seems like old times getting introduced to the stage from Andrew Sunshine. And I don't know if everybody else can hear this, maybe just those of us on stage, but it really does seem like a cinema event because as everybody joins, there's a little pop in the background. So it just sounds like popcorn going off. So it's put me in a great mood already. Good morning, evening, afternoon to everybody. Dolby as a global company, we've really ridden this wave of the pandemic as well. Closing offices and supporting our Dolby employees and families as each country closed. So we've been there from day one and trying to support everyone that we can. And during these times, Dolby's really trying to support our customers and the industry where possible, as we have for over 50 years. The movie industry is such a vital business for Dolby. And we're doing what we can to keep things moving forward while making sure our dealers and exhibitors get what they need to be ready to open those screens when the time comes, hopefully sooner rather than later. We're also experiencing on a certain level the box office angst along with the exhibitors and distributors as our Dolby cinemas rely on box office to make the business successful. Again, we're working with all of our Dolby Cinema partners to find ways to help them weather the storm. I did want to take a moment here before I sign off to just let you know what we've been doing to kind of keep engaged with our customers, the dealers and exhibitors. And we've been holding mini training sessions on our products. And this started with the initial closures in China in March. We held 4 sessions in March. We had over 2,300 participants in the 4 events and subsequently 1,000 views of the playback of those webinars. And the success in China was really due to our WeChat channel. We have a great way to reach out to all of the technicians and our customers in China. Conversely, it's been a little bit more challenging outside of China. We have held 9 global webinars covering topics like the CP950, IMS 3000, audio processor overview, cinema server overview, and Dolby's online self-help tools. However, on the 9 events, we had almost 1,100 attendees. And while we thought this was a great opportunity to reach out to all the technicians that they may have some idle time available, we realized that the challenge is really reaching out to them because not all of them have access to the work emails now. With most of the technicians no longer receiving company emails, it's hard to connect with them. So I'm asking you as part of the global team here with us, we will continue to have more webinars. And if you or your colleagues, technicians are interested, have them reach out to us, please, at cinemasupport@dolby.com. And we'll make sure that they're able to get connected to continue education during this downtime. And then we also have over 400 published Dolby training videos in our customer portal at customer.dolby.com/cinema. And with that, thank you all for attending. I know we've got some great speakers attending today, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say as well. And I'll throw it back to you, Julian. Thank you very much. We're happy to be a part of the event today.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much. And I really want to take a second here to really recognize Mike. I'll take a second first to kick Mike off the stage. That's one of the joys that I discover with these webinars is I can take Andrew Sunshine on and off a stage. I can tell him you don't speak more than 2 minutes, Andrew. I'm sorry, that's the rule. So it's very interesting. But before you start blushing, I take you off the stage, Mike, and I'll just say a few words about our friends at Dolby who have been absolutely amazing, stepping in to support this event. So thank you so much. You know that these days we have had to suspend the publication of our magazines in the US and in France. We still have a very active editorial team, but the advertising revenue that comes with the magazine is not there. So having a sponsor like Dolby to step in and say what you do matters and I want to support it means a lot to us, and that's almost a call to all of you to do the same. So don't hesitate to support us. And with that, I will let Daniel start with our guest while I'm trying to take on stage Marion, who seems to be blocked in the audience. And Daniel, you will start waiting for your colleague to join you on stage, and I will disappear and I'll reappear later on. Thank you again. Thanks to all of you for your participation. Daniel, the floor is yours, and welcome and good afternoon to all of you.
Thank you, Julian. And thank you for the executive leadership over at Younique for joining us here in this session today. We are honored and very excited to have them. I wanted to just take a little bit of time, say hi, check in with all of you guys, see how you guys are doing. First off, Laura Ogadabut, how are things going over there? How are you coping with these weird days so far?
Hi, Daniel. Hi, all. Well, look, so far, so good. I'm lucky enough to have a big garden. We've been confined since mid-March here in Belgium, and we're expecting that confinement to be extended until at least the 3rd of May. But you know what? I'm delighted because I keep opening, the window in the morning and just scream, "Hello, world." And this time I can say it for real when I see all the people on the chat. So, hello, world. I'm delighted to be here, and we're all going to be together for the next hour. So thanks again.
Great. And Phil Clapp, also from Younique and from the UKCA, thank you for joining us. Phil, this is probably the only occasion when you're probably thankful that you have the type of weather you usually have in London to keep people indoors.
Yeah, so you say that, but I look outside of my window and it's actually sunny in London, and we had probably the sunniest Easter weekend that we've had in a number of years. Now, of course, if cinemas were open, that would be a source of complaint, but we are where we are. I think this is 4th week of lockdown, and our government has indicated a number of weeks to come. But like many of the people on the video cast, I'm sure I find myself and others find themselves to be busier than ever. Who knew you could close your office and be busier than ever? But I see that as a positive. I see that as an industry working very, very hard and turning its mind to when we can welcome customers back into cinemas again.
Fantastic. Thanks. And of course, we also have from Spain, Jaime Terrazon. Jaime, first off, you have to send Andrew Sunshine an email. That intro video was like 20% Fernando Evole, and I didn't see you once. You have to send an email. You have to sort that out. Fernando, it's always nice to see you, but the balance there. How are you doing over in Spain?
Well, we have no problems with Fernando, so it's good that the video, I think it bring back memories to all of us about how we enjoyed the last Cine Europe, and we look forward to enjoying this new one in August. Here in Barcelona, as I guess all people that or most people that are listening to us, we are locked down at home. Yes, more than 4 weeks now, and probably another month to go till we are allowed to get back to activity. Not cinemas, but I mean the economy needs to go back to work. No, I'm not going to say anything about sunny weather. I guess I got the best sunny weather here in Barcelona, but it's not now the moment to argue about that. No. So welcoming everyone that has joined this webinar, and we will do our best to find or to discuss about a lot of questions that we have and very few answers so far, but we're working on that. That's the spirit.
Thank you, Jaime. I said I would disappear from the stage, but I'm coming back just for a second for a little housekeeping exercise. Some of you may be attending their first Box Office Pro live session. So you have obviously discovered, most of you, the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. You also have a place on the questions where no question has been asked so far. You can put any question there, and you can also upvote also upvote the question from the other participants so that we can give priority to the various questions. So don't hesitate to vote for someone else's question rather than asking 10 times the same question. That would be helpful. There will be some polls that will show during the presentation. And last element in terms of rules of the game, there is no forbidden question, there is no wrong topic, but there is a wrong way to put any question. And so no aggressivity will be tolerated in any way, no kind of misbehavior in any case. I keep the complete freedom to take down any message that I don't feel has the good spirit, or anyone who doesn't feel have the good spirit, I will take him off the room, because we all have too much stress to cope with to be able to support, to get anything else than nice and positive and supporting debate. With this little rule of the game, I'll let you go on, and I promise I'll disappear for a moment now. Daniel, Marion, and I'll just introduce Marion, our chief editor from Box Office Pro in France, or more precisely in Versailles.
Hello.
How are you, Marion?
Yeah, good, very good, thank you. I'm very impressed to be here and to see all those countries around me.
That's so good. Yeah, it's always weird to hear someone with a thick accent like yours on stage, but that's okay. Never mind. Daniel, go ahead. You can get started, and I'll be with you towards the end of the session.
Thanks, Julian, and welcome, Marion. I know that you had an initial question lined up for our friends over at Unique, if you wanted to take the lead.
Sure. Yes, to begin, can we talk about the Unique? Maybe we can remind the Unique role and what were the actions done since the beginning of the crisis. And maybe also, can you explain also about the stimulus package of 500 billion euros, and how is it going to be dispatched or attributed?
Okay.
Thank you.
Shall I kick off then, and Laura and Jaime can jump in? I mean,
yeah, sure.
A number of people on the call will probably know, but I mean, Unique is essentially a grouping of national trade bodies and key operators across Europe, currently representing 38 territories. There's not a national trade body in all of those territories, so there are also key operators from a number of those territories and beyond. And for that reason, its role is probably slightly different to some extent than the national trade body. Of course, we lobby the European Commission, and Laura and Jaime can say a little bit more about that and the stimulus package. But I think we identify our early role within the current crisis was in sharing information and indeed, good and promising practice. So one of the first things we did was do and it's become a kind of rolling survey, essentially, of experience across territories, and that's been presented as a document which is on the Unique website, which I'm sure we can send you the link or share the link with you during the course of this webinar. And that's really to both, give ourselves a snapshot of what's going on across those territories, but also I think we have used it, and colleagues in the various territories have used it very much as a starting point in some cases for their discussions with their own national government. It's very interesting and probably inevitable that different territories have approached this in different ways. Some of that is to do with the relationship between the film and cinema sector and government, how close it is or how not close it is. But also I think it's about the culture of the relationship within the sector. So if you look at the document, and we'll get into the detail of this, I'm sure, later on, what you'll see is a variety of different ways that government in all its guises has sought to support industry. But what you'll also see is actually a number of ways that industry has sought to support itself. And as we move into this next stage, where we find a number of our members are starting to think about what it means to be coming out of the current crisis and coming out of lockdown, that process will change, and that will be again about learning good practice and learning experiences where some territories are on a slightly different trajectory than my own, for example. So it's about sharing information, sharing experience, and empowering national associations and indeed nationally based operators to make the arguments for support for their industry. I don't know if Laura and Jaime want to add anything to that.
Now, can you say it all about us being, coordinating and sharing information and making sure that all members have all the information they need to allow them to advocate as best as they can in the national country? I think when it comes to the stimulus package, the EU stimulus package, one of our core mission at UNIC is, of course, to be the voice of cinema operators with the EU institutions, so the Parliament, the European Commission, and also the Council. That's the EU countries. And so we've been in close, we've been in touch, of course, with members of the European Parliament to let them know about the impact that COVID-19 is having on our industry, so they don't forget us and they think of us when they are working on legislation. We've also been in touch, of course, with the European Commission, so they know where we are, where we stand at that moment, and how we might need them. And when it comes to the stimulus package, I think one thing everyone needs to keep in mind, without going too much into the details, is that any money that the EU is spending comes mainly from the member states. That's where the budget comes from. And that all the plans that they are announcing, it could be for loans, it can be for guarantee funds. Then this has to be implemented by EU countries, and they will decide how they will spend the money. They'll have to follow some rules, but they will decide. So far we have, for example, a Corona Response Investment Initiative, which is basically giving money to what we call the structural funds, and that's up to regions within the EU to decide how they will spend that money and which industries they will support. We have more flexibility regarding state aid rules. So member states can decide to support a specific sector of their economy. And normally the rules are extremely strict. So you can support, of course, your cultural sector if you decide to. You can also support the fishing sector, for example, but something to keep in mind. And we, of course, had the stimulus package you talk about, which was 3 things. Half of it goes straight to the health sector. Then a big part of it goes to a new plan called SURE, which is loans given to EU countries to help them with their employment initiatives or unemployment initiatives. And the last one is the European Guarantee Fund, which is giving insurance to national banks to give loans to companies that are the most affected by the crisis. It can all turn to be very technical, so everyone knows we are working on a document that we'll put on our website, on the UNIC website, to look into all these EU initiatives that might benefit cinemas. And to finish on another meeting, last week, all the EU ministers for culture met via video conference. And in the press conference after this meeting, cinemas were specifically mentioned as having suffered massively from this crisis and has an industry that was in great need of support. So our voice was heard, at least on this.
Thanks, Laura. I would like to add let me see if yeah. Do you hear me well?
Yeah, you're good.
Well, I just wanted to add a bit on that the fact that Europe is so diverse and that we are actually acting on each country's level, we should take that as an advantage in the sense that we have different experiences in different countries. We have a country like Austria that is just started to reopen, not cinemas, but yes, economic activity this week. So we can learn from different experiences in different countries, and that is the role, as it has been explained, that UNIC is bringing to all its members and associations and companies around Europe and its territories. So that allows us to be more flexible and to have more elements to convince our governments or to advocate for different solutions. No? Because in the end, we have started in this in different moments of times. There are some territories that were heavily impacted initially, others that have coped better with the current situation. But I guess that by the end of all this, if we are good at combining our experiences and learning from them, we might be coming out of that more or less at the same time, which is one of our big challenges now if we're looking for solutions or for reopening our activities and our cinemas.
And I think that's
I would also just briefly, Daniel, I would also point people towards a couple of statements which UNIC issued towards the end of last month. One which was directed very much at the industry about regarding a call for unity. We have a business model which works and is proven to work, and at a time of stress like this, it's clear there's a temptation to step away from that. But we think that actually showing a unity of purpose and a belief in our industry, which we all have at this time, is more important than ever. And the second one goes to that point about supporting our members in lobbying their national governments. And it was really a kind of rallying call for national governments at all levels to look to the cinema industry as one of the industries they need to support, given not just its economic importance, but also its social and cultural importance. So those are both on the UNIC website, and I'm sure we can again circulate the link to those if people are interested.
And if I may add as well, because we talk about unity of the sector, here in Brussels, UNIC is, of course, an organization representing cinemas, but we have counterparts representing producers, representing distributors, representing actually the whole value chain, and we all work closely together to see how we can, get any support. And we've actually published a statement together as well last week that Julien is just sharing with everyone now, but just to show that we are, of course, working close cooperation with the whole value chain.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate that perspective and insights. And I think one of the key points that you bring up is that, yes, this is not only a continental issue, it's a global matter, that we're all in this together. But a lot of the solutions, a lot of that recovery is going to come on a territory by territory basis. Before we delve into specific territories to go into detail on how they've been addressing the crisis, I wanted to ask our colleagues at UNIC, on a general basis, what have you seen from specific territories that you find noteworthy before we go into deeper detail on each of them?
I think
Jaime,
I will let
Laura,
I was about to. Do you want to talk about Spain, and then we'll cover other territories?
No, there's no need to stop by Spain. But obviously, one of the things that we've learned is that most of the mechanisms or supports or aids that Laura was talking about have been channeled to the different countries. And we are still at an early stage, mostly all around Europe, because the money has been promised, or the aid has been promised, or the measures have been promised, but few of them have been delivered yet. So in that process, it's very useful to have, and this is the case of Spain, where we don't have historically, we have never had in the past that support from our government to our specific industry. Yes, to the production of movies, but not to the exhibition sector. So we have another task, which is defining if these measures are implemented, how and which are the mechanisms or the institutions that have to channel that money or that support. It is therefore very useful for us to have this support from UNIC, in the sense that we learn and we have examples that we can show and illustrate our government on how these things can be built or construct, because they don't exist or have never existed so far. So that has also given us the opportunity to build all those things. Yet the measures, as I don't know if we have to go deeper into the details, because it's not about talking a very specific situation in the countries, but most of the problems are based on the same things: support for our employees, financial support for our companies, and then support for the reopening and getting people back to the cinemas, because that is one of the challenges that I'm sure everybody in this webinar is thinking about.
I mean, just to pick up on that point from Jaime, I think what we're seeing across the piece, although different national governments are dealing with it in slightly different ways, is a recognition that cinemas are a cash business. The moment people stop coming, the cash stops coming in. We don't have an ongoing source of revenue. The vast majority of cinemas have little or no reserves. I see Ben from Screens asked about the particular position of UK cinemas, where a number have said that, you know, they will be in difficulties if a 3-month lockdown becomes a longer lockdown. And I think we're very conscious of that. And also cinemas have high fixed costs. They run buildings. They're bound by certain requirements in terms of spend, which, you know, other parts of the film value chain aren't. So what you were seeing essentially across the piece are different measures by different governments to attempt to address all of those things. Now, one of the positives for us as an industry, if you can see it as that, is that we're not alone in this. There are other similar sectors or other sectors with similar concerns, you know, hospitality and leisure and retail, for example. So on a national level, and indeed on a regional level, we can make common calls with those sectors in arguing our case to government. You know, the cinema sector is hugely important. It has importance far beyond its footprint in terms of employment and economy and those kind of things. But we can amplify our importance by making clear that, you know, if we disappear, there are a range of associated goods and services which also potentially go with us.
So just to add as well, if you're looking at the ideal country for fixed cost, Denmark is covering all fixed cost at the moment, to give inspiration. And the second thing, of course, is, you know, if you look at our research, we've also included in their specific support. So not only the one addressing cinemas, you know, as part of the overall economy and business, but you also have a number of countries where you have a much more sectorial approach as well, on top and in addition to what is already offered. So Norway has had more help for the cultural sector, for example, Italy for the entertainment industry, France for the film industry, and that's so in our research as well.
And of course, every country is dealing with the spread of this virus at different stages, some countries being affected more than others. We spoke briefly about Spain already with Jaime. Another country that unfortunately has also been struggling with this crisis quite significantly is Italy. Julian, you mentioned that we have a colleague from Italy, Mario Mazzetti. Would you be able to bring him on stage so we can get a little bit from his perspective on how the Italian market is dealing with the crisis? We're trying to get Mario on stage right now.
I'm not Mario. I'm just Julien. I will not come back. We have apparently some difficulties getting Mario on stage, but I'm sure that Laura and the team can talk about the specific situation, and I'll keep trying inviting Mario to join us on stage. I know he's in the audience, but sometimes, you know, this is not Cine Europe. This is not perfect.
Well, if you allow me to say something, because Italy, as is the case of Spain, we are the leaders of casualties because of this crisis, and the impact has been very strong, and the death toll is incredibly high. So it is true that maybe our experience can help, or the experience in our countries can help people realize and governments realize that. I guess now everybody's aware of that, but maybe we've taken too much time or spent too much time before reacting correctly to this situation, and now the consequences is what we see now. So in this aspect, I think that we can try to learn from these cases and see which are the solutions that we can bring up for this problem. We are still at the very early, at least in Spain and Italy, we're at the very early stages. So now you are discussing with governments that are more obviously concerned about casualties of the death toll of this virus, and the impact it has on the health system is the only thing that concerns them now. So we will need some time before they can start taking action or taking actions that can solve the problems of industry, because now their only priority obviously is is working with the health system to solve that as quickly as possible.
Of course, a difficult period in both Spain and Italy, two of the most important markets in Europe. I want to turn to my colleague, Marion. You've been seeing some of the questions popping up from our audience members. Could you bring a couple of them up so our panelists can address them?
Sure, we have many questions. You hear me? Yeah, great. We have many questions, and the first one would be regarding the security conditions and health security. How to deal with this with different countries, and is it better? The question is it better to wait or to reopen with those conditions?
I mean, I think, you know, as with most of these things, it will be for each territory to, you know, gauge the environment as it sees it. But certainly, I think our expectation across the piece is that cinemas will reopen with additional safeguards for customers. You know, there won't be a point of waiting until some indeterminate point when those are no longer needed. But certainly, I think, you know, even if government doesn't require them at the national level, there'll be an expectation on the part of customers, not least because many of those cinemas that went into lockdown introduced social distancing before they went into lockdown. Now the nature of those will need to be a balance between providing suitable reassurance to customers that they're entering into a safe environment where the cinema, you know, places the priority on people's well-being, and the fact that these are places of entertainment. I see Heather asked about cinemas taking temperature of guests upon arrival. I would be very, very, very loath to suggest that's the way to welcome customers into a cinema, is to kind of get the thermometer out. You know, it will be for each company and each territory to decide. I mean, within the UK, what we're looking at is whether we can introduce some level of consistency across the piece. So whether you're a big operator or a small operator, almost whatever your business model, customers know what they'll be coming back into, are reassured by that, and we're able to message that in a consistent way to offer people the reassurance that it's safe to get back into cinemas. But certainly, you know, and colleagues should feel free to disagree as always. But I think, you know, almost in every territory, there will need to be a level of additional provision for customers in order for them to be even confident to come into the cinema, almost regardless of what government requires.
I mean, it's also a positive sign that in a number of countries, some of our members have already been approached by the government to think about what these rules should look like, what would be practical to implement. So this will be done in cooperation and not only imposed. I think, as Phil said, the need for consistency and coherence will probably be key. And for us at UNIC, and again, because each territory is different, each territory will probably have its own rules to implement regarding health and safety. We'll make sure to exchange best practices and see how we can best help members.
And of course, I would like to go ahead, Jaime.
Yeah, I would like to add one thing, that is, let's take the example of the security measures in airports after 9/11. I think it cannot be compared because 9/11 is a different thing, but most of the people that are listening today are heavy travelers, and they used to travel a lot before that happened, and afterwards they get used to those measures. And again, I think that, as Phil said, we have to look for consistency in those measures, but people will get used to them if we presented them in the right way. And what will happen, as I said before, we will have different examples in different countries, so that will allow us to have more flexibility. And again, a lot of these measures are also linked to the country's culture. So there are some societies that are more used to certain disciplines, and others that are not. And each country can be, the same measure in a different country can be perceived in a different way. So we will have to work on that. But I'm fully confident that the audiences will react positively to that, and that they will follow the rules, because it won't be exclusively about cinemas, no?
And we have a question about what we can learn from China's example. What are the security measures they had?
Well, one thing that we can learn is that we don't have to open cinemas too soon, because then if you have to close them the week after is not a good example or a good message to the audience. Although the case in China, it was a very limited reopening and with not the right approach and in a very specific zone in a very limited number of cinemas. So I mean, it's too early because cinemas have not yet opened again in China. No?
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the challenge, being able to reopen in a way that makes sense, where this isn't a public health concern, when we can celebrate cinemas reopening rather than be worried about cinemas reopening. Yeah. And obviously, as we sort of see different markets deal with it in different ways, I think one of the two big questions that we hear, of course, the first one we just tackled already, which is when could we reopen? How do we reopen? The second big question I've been hearing from exhibitors all over the world is, what's going to be available to play on my screens? There's been a lot of concern, obviously, over premium VOD, over the theatrical window. I wanted to ask our colleagues at Unique, have you been able to stay in touch with distributors? What have you heard in terms of content availability once cinemas do reopen from our colleagues in distribution?
So we've maintained an open dialogue with many colleagues in distribution, particularly at the major studios. And I think it's worth reiterating that we are in a genuinely, people often say we're in a unique situation. We're in a genuinely unique situation at the moment. And so the decision on the part of some studios to bring films early, as it were, to video on demand, films which had done their theatrical business, but where actually the theatrical window at a time when cinemas were closed, has little relevance. I think, everyone has their own view, but personally, that's understood. And I think that is, a consequence of this unique set of circumstances we find ourselves in. Equally, I don't think we believe that ultimate, that changes the equilibrium of the industry once we come out of this in any significant way. And even in territories where the window is regulated, such as is the situation with colleagues in France, there's been some allowance made for the current situation, but there is absolutely no sense that once we're back to whatever approaches normality, that the window won't continue to exist and continue to work for the sector. And by the sector, I mean not just obviously cinema exhibitors, but also for colleagues in distribution. There's a bigger question about, as you said, Daniel, what content will be available if cinemas were to reopen in some form in a few weeks' time or even a couple of months' time, what content will be available? And it's very difficult, obviously, for us to give reassurances on that, because it's equally difficult for colleagues at studios to give reassurances on that. They're watching this situation unfold on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis, the same we are. So, in the UK, for example, I'm mindful that No Time to Die would have been released last Friday in the UK. And when the decision to move No Time to Die was announced, a number of exhibitors in the UK, understandably, reacted as if the sky had fallen in. Given where we were last Friday, it makes absolute sense to do so, or it made absolute sense to do so. So, we will continue that dialogue with exhibitors. I know there is, I see it on the question, an issue about, do we need to wait for the US to come out of this current situation before, day and date releases of the major films will be available? Clearly, we hope not. Clearly, we're maintaining that dialogue with the studios, on behalf of all the European territories we represent. But this is, if nothing else, a time of uncertainty. And so I think, there are a whole range of moving parts that we at UNIC and national associations and indeed colleagues at cinema operators are all trying to manage, we're all trying to have conversations about. And what I've been refreshed by, not that I expect anything else, is the openness and transparency with which colleagues at the studios have been willing to have those conversations. We've not always agreed and we've not always come to the same conclusion on things, but there is a dialogue. And, you know, one of the things which has been refreshing about this is that sense of unity and solidarity of purpose that we've seen through this crisis today.
Thanks, Phil.
My colleagues are dumbstruck by that.
Well, I think everyone takes a step back whenever exhibition and distribution starts talking about theatrical windows. We all take a nice breath before we can recover. In terms of coordinating best practices and guidelines, of course, one of the challenges for a continental trade body like UNIC is that every single country is going to be not only at a different stage of how they're approaching this crisis, but also will have different laws and regulation about how to recover. And I've been seeing a lot of comments and questions here on the availability of a sort of best practices guide or a set of guidelines or suggestions. Is that something that an international trade body could help put forward, or is it something that local cinemas are going to have to coordinate from a national perspective on a territory by territory basis?
I think it's certainly something that we'll be able to share, considering what each territory will be doing. But again, I do think that the rules will vary. What we can start early in the process is, as countries will reopen at different dates, and some of them will reopen earlier than others, is of course look like at the measures they will be implementing, given the new rules they will have to follow. And then of course share this and pull all this together like we've been doing with our research project as well. And you can of course look at what would work best for your territory, for your company as well, depending of course on your size and what's feasible. So we've started already receiving some questions from members about it, and that's something we'll certainly start cracking on with in the next couple of days, because in a way it's, you know, it's nice to see that people are thinking about, you know, reopening, you know, and being really, you know, looking forward about it and thinking what should we be doing.
And in terms of conceptualizing this sort of reopening of the industry, have you considered what sort of social distancing measures that maybe we've already seen before this crisis started? I was looking over at how some cinemas in France and some cinemas even in Ireland were tackling sort of half capacity measures, 50% measures. Are there any sort of initiatives that you have found interesting so far in how to encourage social distancing in the cinema experience?
Well, one of the things which this is a point a colleague made to me this morning, so I'll claim it as my own idea. One of the points that a colleague made to me this morning, where we have an advantage, is that, you know, cinemas and some other sectors, but certainly cinemas, have the ability to control admission. And, you know, to the extent that people are willing to abide by it, to have allocated seating, etc. So, you know, there is the technology now in place to allocate seating to people to maintain social distancing. And there's a danger sometimes, and certainly, you know, I see it in the UK, and it's been in a number of other government announcements in other territories, of badging cinemas and theatres with bars, cafes, restaurants, and other public venues which are much more open access. So I think, you know, what we should be looking at and what we should be sharing experience of is how the technologies which make allocation of seating, etc., more straightforward in cinema than they are arguably in other sectors, how those work. It's not for us, you know, as a regional trade body. Equally, it's not for national trade bodies to tell their members what to do and what not to do. But at least sharing and shining a light on that experience and that expectation means, as Jaime said, there'll be a consistency of approach across the piece. What we need to be mindful of, and it runs as a thread through almost everything that UNIC does, is that there are different kind of political and cultural environments in every territory. So clearly, you know, whatever happens will need to be aligned with those. But I think certainly, you know, it's not a position we choose, but the fact that some territories are coming out of this sooner than others means that there's an opportunity to learn lessons and to share that experience, and therefore, you know, seek greater kind of quality in terms of that implementation.
And of course, let's pivot quickly to ask this question that I think is in everybody's mind. Not to put you guys on a spot, but you are tracking on a territory by territory basis where everyone is, what the time frame is in different countries. When we held a similar live session with our colleagues over at NATO in the United States, they provided a rough estimated time frame with a caveat that everything can change in a moment's notice, that they're more or less seeing early June, late May as a sort of beginning stage, gradual reopening of cinemas, little by little, ramping up to hopefully having wide releases at some point in July. Obviously, if we look at the US release schedule, I think the first major title scheduled is Christopher Nolan's Tenet for mid-July. And I think that would be a great celebration if it's safe to do so. Are you seeing any sort of time frames or timetables for a return from any of the unique territories?
Jaime, I mean, in terms of what's happened in Spain in the last few days, and I guess if we can get Mario on Italy as well, that's probably, you know, you're seeing more light than we are, I would say, so you're probably a better place to talk about this. Yeah,
well, it's a difficult question to answer. Obviously, we have the same timeline in mind that Daniel, you mentioned, but I guess it is too early, even for the United States, it's too early to say those things. We need, as I said at the beginning, we are looking for a lot of answers, but unfortunately now we cannot have all those answers, because I would put it in another way, because in Spain we are, as I said, we are talking to government, and they are only concerned about the health problem. In other countries, like for example, I mentioned Austria, they're just starting now to reopen activity. So it's a country that has had a much lower impact of the virus. So maybe they've done things better, or they've been more lucky. I don't know what's the answer to that, but again, there will be some territories that will be ready to open well before the other ones, no? Or in a week's time. I do think that in the end we will more or less be around the same dates, or the same weeks, or the same month, more or less, as a sole market. But again, I think it's too early to put some dates. We all have those dates that you mentioned, and those films have been confirmed, for example, in our territory. So we hope to have our cinemas open by then. But it's just a hope. Now we cannot guarantee anything.
And I think I would mention that one of the beauty, of course, of Europe is its diversity. So there's not really consistency across the, you know, exit of the lockdown calendars. So each country, of course, has its own. It can change within 1 week or 2 weeks. We've seen some countries slowly starting reopening either their schools or, you know, some very specific shops. So like Czech Republic, for example, you mentioned Austria, Jaime. Denmark as well, you know, where the schools are reopening. And I think we're going to have to, of course, keep an eye on these countries. But again, it's going to vary territory by territory. And interestingly enough, when the European Commission tried to prepare an exit strategy for all EU countries, it was very badly received. So we are, of course, tracking, you know, what different things are done. And for example, in Italy, they're releasing the lockdown and allowing bookshops to reopen. So, which is not the case in other territories. So everyone's different. But as Jaime said, we would hope, you know, to have a reopening of cinemas sooner rather than later.
Of course, I think we're all excited for that recovery.
And we are coming from these weeks. We have mostly had bad news. We're still having bad news, but I hope very soon we will start receiving good news from different countries, and that will, in a way, give us a brighter picture of what our future will be. You know? and we will be able to start talking about specific weeks, specific dates, and reopening strategies. It's been mentioned several times in this webinar. Things change from one day to the next one, so we will have what we might be discussing today in 2 weeks' time could be completely different. I hope in a more positive way.
It's something that my colleague Rebecca Polly has labeled "hurry up and wait." I think everyone is really excited to get back to work, start focusing on opening those doors, but we have to hurry up and wait for the moment and sort of be patient while we weather this crisis. One of the things that we've been seeing a lot from cinemas during this pause is a sort of re-engagement with our customers. Of course, while your doors are closed, you don't want to lose that contact. You want to continue having a conversation with the audience so you can communicate that they can return to cinemas once it's safe to return to cinemas, once we can celebrate that return to cinemas. Here in the United States, we saw the news that came out yesterday that Lionsgate has partnered with Fandango and YouTube to have a sort of streaming watch parties hosted by different high-profile actors to benefit the different industry fundraising efforts for cinema workers. I think that's a good example of using that energy that we all have in starting to formulate a celebration of the movie-going experience. When we are ready to return, we can do it at full force. Julian, obviously, the situation in France, part of the box office company includes Allociné, which is a very big, very large B2C arm, probably comparable to IMDb and Fandango here in the US. On the French market, could you tell us a little bit about that experience and some of the projects and conversations you've been having with your colleagues?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Just a few words about that. We've been working over the past few weeks in the US and also with the French Cinema Association, FNCF, in France. We initiated a hashtag campaign in France, and we think that the idea of finding a common catalyst for all the initiatives that are taken throughout the territories by the different chains, the different actors, is something that made sense. And we decided to line up our B2C website, Allociné, of course, in France, but moving forward, Sensacine, Adoro Cinema in Brazil, Filmstart and Movie Pilot in Germany. And I've asked our colleagues to help us come up with some content. And so just want to share a couple of elements here for you this morning. Number one, just share very briefly a quick document that we created to show the value of going to the movies all together. So the team, you're seeing I'm having a hard time because at the same time I'm trying to invite the chief editor of Allociné on stage, but he cannot make it because technically it doesn't work. So I will just share with you a little treat that Allociné prepared for us in the form of two short videos. The first one is an interview of a very famous French actor, Christophe Lambert. And we think that celebrating the movie-going experience can also use this kind of contribution. And in the US, there was a lot of talk around the very nice op-ed of Christopher Nolan in the Washington Post, I believe. But we think that calling the talents to talk about the movie-going experience is a good thing to do, even when we are in a lockdown period. So, little present from Allociné for you. They have been kind enough to even translate or subtitle this for you. Enjoy this.
Quand je suis dans une salle de cinéma, je suis heureux d'avoir des gens autour de moi, parce qu'il y a une vraie participation du public. J'aime l'atmosphère feutrée, le côté confortable, le côté humain d'une salle de cinéma. C'est C'est en 1963, j'avais 6 ans, et c'était pour voir Merlin, l'Enchanteur, et que je ne vous cache pas, je regarde encore aujourd'hui. Le film que j'ai vu à l'âge de 12 ans, en 1969, Il était une fois dans l'Ouest, parce que j'ai trouvé que Sergio Leone, à cette époque, réinventait le cinéma. Le Napoléon d'Abel Gance, j'ai trouvé le film exceptionnel, l'acteur exceptionnel, un charisme hallucinant. L'année dernière, à Marienbad, j'ai tenu le coup 30 minutes.
Eh bien, racontez-moi donc la suite de notre histoire.
Orange Mécanique. J'étais jeune, très jeune. La violence de ce film a un côté surréaliste. Et malheureusement, elle correspond à une violence très actuelle. À 9h du matin, à l'UGC Les Halles. Sur le côté, et si possible, tout seul. Alors non, moi j'adore le programme, j'adore la pub, j'adore les bandes annonces. J'aime le fait d'attendre le film. Je suis à fond VO, sauf si c'est un film français. Popcorn à fond, des kilos de popcorn. Ça dépend aussi du sujet du film, mais en moyenne, j'aime bien digérer un film tout seul, me l'approprier, comprendre ce que moi j'ai compris, et puis après le partager avec d'autres gens. C'est le dernier James Bond, parce que je suis un fou de James Bond, et surtout que j'ai été très déçu par Spectre.
Name?
Bond. James Bond.
I'm back. Yes, it's working. So again, I wish I could have invited Johan, our chief editor at Allociné, to share the thinking process behind this content. But I think this kind of contents do help. I've just shared with you another quick link that I invite you to visit, which is we have created a moviestogether.org page, which is meant to be a global counter for people to promise that they will get back to the cinema. And I think that being able to share these kind of tools across all the different hashtags that we may create in our respective territories will go a long way. So the idea here is more to share some perspective tools so that you make them yours and you adapt them. And I think there is no ownership in these things. There is no ego or intellectual property. It's how do we create a catalyst around that. So what I suggest, we'll get back to the discussion. And at the very end of this session, I will share with you another nice video about what On ira tous au cinéma, this kind of French movies together hashtag means for the team here in France. And I'm sure this content will resonate for many of you. Laura, any specific comment on these questions of how and when is the right time to re-engage our audiences and the initiatives that you may have seen in different territories? It's not only for you, Laura, but you're unmuted and you're the woman on stage, so I think it's just logical that you go first.
Oh, many thanks. I remember that. Yeah, I think it's been interesting to see how cinemas have been keeping in touch with their audience, so trying to maintain that link, especially with their, loyal audiences who have the habit of going to a specific cinema. So either, with social media, that's been, of course, really important. You've also seen, for example, cinemas encouraging their audiences to buy vouchers that they can use later on when the cinemas will reopen. You will have seen also cinemas, asking their audience, what was your best moment at the cinema, etc. I think on a national basis, there will be a need for a kind of back to the cinema strategy. And we need to think about it now, of course. We can't wait until cinemas reopen. So, having a big campaign, of course, understanding the audience mood, you know, and how willing they will be to, and how quickly they will be willing to come back to the cinema. So we talk about reassuring them with a number of measures, and also, you know, involving local talent and, you know, key figures to talk about their love for cinemas. There is, of course, there's not one size fits all message. And again, I think that will vary a lot from territory to territory. And, you know, each country will decide what works best for them. They will, of course, reopen at different times. And I think our role in this will be, of course, sharing information, promoting these campaigns, but also to talk us as Unique about the value of going to the cinema and sharing that amazing experience together. And that we can do, of course, at our, you know, regional level.
And just one comment that I would add on that is, I think there are lots of initiatives around that, and the key element is how do we keep the right level of initiatives coming from all parts and the right level of coordination. I guess maybe we are just discovering what your daily life is about, but that's an interesting challenge. And Marion is back with us finally. Phil?
Okay, I'll start again. Can I just add one thing? I think there's a danger in seeing the audience as one homogenous group. And, you know, we know that this virus presents a greater risk to some subsectors of the audience than others. And so one of the things I think we need to be mindful of is that different audience subsets may have a different perception of the threat that going to the cinema poses and their readiness to go to the cinema as a result of that. So that suggests to me a number of things. As Laura said, it suggests maybe a more segmented message, you know, something, this is entirely a generalization, but something which is more about the excitement of cinema going for a younger audience, and something which tempers that some with messages around, you know, the safeguards that are in place for a slightly older audience, people like me. The other thing is that also speaks potentially to the content mix. So when we go back, you know, are we providing content for those people we think are most likely to go back? Or are we also mixing in content for people we most need to encourage to come back in because they're the people who are most hesitant about doing so? So, you know, the lesson I take from that is this needs to be analysis and insight driven. There can't be an assumption that the message which works for one part of the audience is the message which works for another part of the audience.
Great, thanks a lot, Daniel. Back to you. I see that we have a number of other last questions in the audience. It could go on for a long time, but I don't think it's necessarily the best thing to do, to go on for forever. I just want to share while we finish on this with this one a little other treat for you, which is that actually we have been working on a little goodie. Because you know that when we do a convention like this one, you really want to have a goodie bag, and we felt so frustrated that we didn't have a goodie bag this time. And so in this time of confinement and lockdown, we try to be creative. So at the end of the presentation, I will share a little tool for you to get this virtual hat or challenge us to create more caps if needed. Yeah, sometimes we need to be a bit light in these very difficult days. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Let's finish up with one more question from the audience, Marion. I know you've been tracking that. I want to make sure we can get as much as possible. And after that last question, why don't we segue into a quick sort of parting thoughts?
Oh, you hear me? Sorry. Well, we have many questions. Sorry. Maybe also I wanted to look at the polls, the answers you gave. We have many answers as well. For example, do you feel that your country government is supportive enough of cinema proposing efficient measures? The answer is no for 71%. And maybe also there's a big there's a lot of demand for more cross-sectorial and international collaboration. So see, we have.
I think the need for coordinated campaign seems to be a big thing. And as we were talking, as we were presenting that and talking about it, I was even exchanging with some national association in a country sharing my language, who were sharing the initiatives that are taking place. So it's really happening as we speak, which is great to see. What are for you maybe the next steps in managing this crisis? There has been a lot of discussion and talks about the different stages of the crisis. What do you see as the most important challenge for the next 2 to 3 weeks before maybe we speak again and look at the next steps? It's going to be a marathon and not a short race. But what is the next step in this marathon?
Shall I go? Okay. Yeah. So I think we are in a place where, and it is inevitably a generalization, where most territories are starting to think now about what a back to the cinema strategy looks like. You know, what that means in terms of insight, what that means in terms of messaging, and what that means in terms of, you know, operational considerations. And I see a number of questions down the side of people saying, how do we reassure people that cinema going is a safe activity in order to get people out of their homes? And there is the content piece, you know, the discussion with colleagues in distribution, particularly the US studios, about their plans for content. You know, that is, to use your phrase, Julien, a marathon rather than a sprint. That, you know, there are no easy answers. And, you know, as Jaime said at the outset, that, you know, we know a lot of the questions. The answers are a bit trickier to come to at the moment. But all we can do as you know, both the regional trade body and the national trade bodies that are part of UNIC is keep that dialogue going. So my encouragement to cinema operators who are on this call is to, you know, ensure that you make your views known to your national association, and in turn, you know, national associations on the call, make sure you make your views known to UNIC in order that we have as clear a picture of what's going on. But certainly we will endeavor to continue to share information through the UNIC website and through the updates which the UNIC office issues on a weekly basis. It's, you know, as I said at the outset, you know, there are lots of moving parts, and we just need to keep across all of those, often without simple answers to any of them.
We send updates on a daily basis, actually. Dare I say?
Daily. I only read them weekly. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think what I would say is, you know, not to repeat what Phil has just, you know, mentioned, but we're all in it for the long haul. So please make the most of us. You know, we're here to help. We're here to provide any support that we can, and that, of course, will go way beyond, you know, the lockdown and confinement period. And I think we all agree on that. Because I think sometimes there is a misconception with public authorities that, you know, they're just looking at this specific period of lockdown, but we need to remind them that for us, we're looking at a much longer term than that. And of course, you know, we will be there to support you and help you as much as we can. And I think that's, you know, what we need to keep in mind and all stick together.
Sounds like a plan for sure. You have, Jaime, you have a last word as well on the next few weeks, and how you're going to support the industry in this challenging period, the beginning of the marathon, or maybe we're in the middle of the marathon.
Let's be optimistic and say we are at the middle of the marathon. No, I would not add anything to what Phil and Laura have said, but we forgot to mention one thing that I think is worth saying. It's about local content, local movies. No, we've spoken about the studios plans, which are very essential to our business, but also local movies are important, and this will help us in our release calendars, and could be the element that could help us support the market also when we go back to business.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jaime. So in advance, I want to apologize for the many questions that have not been tackled, because there are so many, but all these questions that we record and keep track of will help us give the right priorities and spin for our next live sessions. And there will be many other live sessions in the near future, because as Phil highlighted, I think there is really a need to collaborate, exchange views, meet, and it's so good to see how it feels good to be even on a chat together, how happy we are to see Andrew Sunshine and on the stage. So we need all of that, and that requires a lot of players to do that. We are happy to contribute, but we also see that there are a lot of other initiatives we are trying to keep track of. So I'm sharing right now on the chat an article that we will try to keep up to date in Box Office Pro in English, trying to give the list of the webinars that will take place, organized by our friend at Celluloid Junkie, our friend and sometimes competitor at Influx, our friends and always friends at ComScore. And you know what, if you are aware of many other places where there are useful webinars, share them with us. We'll be happy to share all of that with as many of you as possible, not to mention in French language the very good webinars that are taking place between ComScore and the Film Français on a weekly basis. So again, when you hear us be so open to everyone, you know that we're in the middle of a real crisis, but that proves that good things can come out of the crisis, which is the industry standing together and united. I promised you a last treat in this presentation, which is a beautiful video from our friends at Allociné celebrating the movie-going experience. Before going there, I just want to thank again and one more time our guest today, Laura, Phil, Jaime. Thanks a lot for your flexibility. Good to have you with us. Daniel and Marion, I couldn't be more proud of the work of the editorial teams in this very difficult period. I wish we could sell some more ads, but we can't. So that's a very good way to highlight, again, our friends at Dolby who have stepped in. And a quick call to action to everybody. I'm not putting the call to action box here, but anyone who wants to support what we're doing, please reach out. We need the support of the industry to keep bringing this value in difficult times. With that, we'll follow up very shortly with other webinars that will be added to our page, and I'll close with this very nice video from our friends at Allociné. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy this nice On ira tous au cinéma video that has been as well subtitled. If I find it, here it is.
and dream with me.
2, please.
1, please.
Please retain your stubs.
Thank you, everybody, and let's keep in touch, and hope to see you all very soon in a theater near you. Bye bye.
Thank you.